7:33 a.m. The Persian Gulf, 22 miles southwest of Farsi Island. Flat water, haze cutting visibility to 6 miles. The temperature already climbing past 94 degrees before 8 in the morning. The kind of heat that makes the air above the water shimmer and turns the horizon into a smear of white light where the sea meets the sky. 2 U.S. Navy riverine command boats were transiting from Kuwait to Bahrain on a routine logistics run. Small vessels, 60 feet long, lightly armed, crewed by 10 sailors each. Their route took them through international waters in the central Persian Gulf, a course that had been run hundreds of times without incident. The crew of RCB-4 was 23 minutes behind schedule due to a minor engine issue that had been corrected at 7:09 a.m. The crew of RCB-5 was keeping pace, holding formation 200 meters off RCB-4's port beam. Both vessels were in radio contact with 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. The morning was routine. The morning was ordinary. It was not going to stay that way. At 7:33 a.m., 4 Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy fast patrol boats emerged from the haze on a bearing of 047 degrees, closing at 30 knots. The IRGC vessels were Boghammer class and Mk-13 class fast boats, each carrying a crew of 8 to 12, armed with heavy machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and one vessel equipped with a 107mm recoilless rifle mounted at the bow. They surrounded the 2 American vessels in less than 90 seconds, forming a box that left no avenue of escape. The lead IRGC commander, broadcasting on VHF Channel 16, ordered the American crews to heave to, lower their weapons, and prepare to be boarded. The American crews, following the rules of engagement governing interactions in contested Gulf waters and the immediate tactical situation, surrounded, outgunned at close range, with no air cover overhead and their nearest support 40 minutes away by sea, complied. 20 sailors, their hands up, their weapons on the deck, taken aboard IRGC vessels and transported at speed toward the Iranian island of Farsi, 31 minutes away. The capture was complete by 8:04 a.m. In Tehran, the decision to exploit the moment had already been made before the sailors reached Farsi Island. The Supreme National Security Council had been informed within minutes. The state media apparatus was placed on alert. But the capture of 20 American sailors was not the main event. It was the cover. It was the distraction. It was designed to pull American attention, diplomatic, political, military, toward the Gulf and toward the sailors, while the real operation executed on a completely different axis. Because at 7:31 a.m., 2 minutes before the RCBs were surrounded, the IRGC Aerospace Force had begun the final arming and targeting sequence for Operation Righteous Fire. Udeid Air Base, Qatar, 40 miles southwest of Doha, the largest American military installation in the Middle East, home to the 379th Air Expeditionary Wing, the combined air operations center for the entire CENTCOM theater, and on any given day, between 90 and 120 American and coalition IRC aircraft, B-52s, F-15Es, F-35As, KC-135 tankers, E-3 Sentry, AWACS, the nerve center of American air power, across 5 million square miles of operational theater. The IRGC Aerospace Force had spent 11 months planning its destruction. The strike package was built around 3 primary weapons systems. First, 48 Fateh 313 precision ballistic missiles, pre-positioned at 4 dispersed launch sites in Fars Province and Bushehr Province. Each Fateh 313 carried a 500-kilogram warhead with a circular error probable of under 10 meters, accurate enough to strike individual hardened aircraft shelters, fuel storage tanks, the CAOC building, and the runway intersection points that would deny operations, even if the shelters survived. Second, 32 Shahed 238 jet-powered cruise missiles, faster and more accurate than the subsonic Shahed 136, flying at Mach 0.8 at very low altitude, tasked against the base radar installation, the air traffic control tower, and the Patriot missile defense battery sites that protected Udeid. Kill the Patriot first, the IRGC planners had reasoned, and the ballistic missiles arrive against blind defenses. Third, 22 Hoveza long-range cruise missiles with a range exceeding 1,300 kilometers assigned to the CAOC building, the Combined Air Operations Center, the brain of American air power in the region. Destroy the CAOC and American air operations across the entire theater would be paralyzed for days, perhaps weeks. The simultaneous sailor capture, the IRGC commander had briefed the Supreme National Security Council, would create a diplomatic and political crisis that would delay the American military response by a minimum of 2 hours. America would be making phone calls. America would be convening meetings. America would be trying to negotiate the sailors' release. And while America was distracted by 20 sailors on Farsi Island, 102 missiles would be turning Udeid Air Base into a smoking ruin. 2 hours of delay. That was the assumption. That was the plan. The IRGC had made 6 catastrophic mistakes. The first mistake: they had been planning Operation Righteous Fire for 11 months. The NSA had been reading their planning communications for 9 of those 11 months. A compromised encryption protocol in the IRGC Aerospace Force's secure command network, a vulnerability identified and quietly exploited by U.S. Cyber Command, had allowed American analysts to reconstruct the operation's target list, timing, and weapon assignments in near real time. The National Security Council had been briefed on Operation Righteous Fire 37 days before the launch date. The response had been pre-planned, pre-authorized, and pre-positioned. The second mistake: they believed the sailor capture would consume American decision-making attention. It did not, because American decision-making for this scenario had already been completed. 37 days of preparation meant that when the IRGC fast boat surrounded the 2 RCBs, the duty officer at CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa did not convene an emergency meeting to figure out what to do. He executed a pre-planned response order that had been sitting in the system since the intelligence picture had crystallized. The sailors were a crisis. The crisis had a plan. The plan was already running. The third mistake: Udeid's aircraft were not at Udeid. Beginning 5 days earlier, under the cover of a routine exercise deployment notification that had been deliberately misleading about the destination, every combat aircraft at Udeid had been repositioned. The B-52S had flown to Diego Garcia. The F-15Es had dispersed to Al Dhafra in the UAE and to Incirlik in Turkey. The F-35As had moved to an undisclosed forward location. What remained at Udeid were aircraft that were non-mission capable for maintenance reasons, a carefully maintained pattern of normal ground activity to preserve the appearance of a fully operational base, and the Patriot batteries, which had been reinforced, not reduced, with an additional firing battery secretly brought in from pre-positioned stocks in Kuwait 4 days earlier. The fourth mistake: the Shahed 238 cruise missiles assigned to kill the Patriot batteries were flying a pre-programmed approach route that the IRGC's intelligence had not updated in 3 months. That route passed through a corridor that the additional Patriot battery, the one installed 4 days ago, was specifically positioned to cover. The IRGC was flying their radar killers directly into the radars they were supposed to kill before the radars could see them. They were flying into the sector that had been arranged specifically to receive them. The fifth mistake: the Hoveza cruise missiles targeting the CAOC building had been assigned GPS coordinates taken from commercial satellite imagery 11 months ago. In the intervening period, the CAOC had been relocated to a hardened facility 214 meters from its original position as part of a base infrastructure upgrade. The original CAOC building was now a storage facility. The Hoveza missiles were flying toward a warehouse. The sixth mistake, and it was the one that made the entire operation irrelevant before a single missile impacted, was the assumption that the IRGC Aerospace Force's launch preparations had been concealed. They had not. The NRO satellite constellation had been watching the four Fateh 313 launch sites in Fars and Bushehr province continuously for 16 days. When the missiles were moved from their storage locations to their launch positions at 5:47 a.m. that morning, the NRO's change detection algorithm flagged the movement within 12 minutes. By 6:15 a.m., Pacific Command and CENTCOM both had confirmation that an Iranian ballistic missile strike was being prepared. By 6:30 a.m., the pre-authorized response package was being loaded into fire control systems across the theater. By 7:31 a.m., the moment the IRGC fast boats surrounded the American RCBs, the American response had been in motion for over an hour. What happened in the next 47 minutes was total. At 7:33 a.m., the exact moment the IRGC broadcast their boarding order to the American cruise, USS The Sullivans, operating in the Central Gulf, received her weapons release authorization via encrypted flash message from Fifth Fleet. Her Tomahawk fire control system had been loaded with target coordinates for all four Fateh 313 launch sites for the previous 19 hours. She fired her first salvo at 7:34 a.m. 16 Tomahawk Block 5 missiles sequenced in pairs, climbing from their VLS cells in a continuous volley and turning southwest toward the Iranian coast. Simultaneously, from Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, 4 F-35. As that had been sitting on alert for 72 hours, were airborne within 4 minutes of the weapons release authorization. Their mission: SEAD, suppression of enemy air defenses, against the 4 Iranian radar sites that provided early warning coverage of the Fateh 313 launch areas. The F-35 has carried AARGMER anti-radiation missiles, the most capable SHIAD weapon in the American arsenal, capable of engaging radar systems that had shut down after detecting the inbound threat because the missile memorized the radar's last known position and continued to that point regardless. The Iranian radar operators had 2 options: stay on and be homed on, or turn off and be hit anyway. 4 radar sites, 4 F-35As, 8 AARGM-ER missiles. The math was uncomplicated. At 7:44 a.m., the Fateh 313 missiles began launching from their 4 sites. 48 missiles over a 90-second window, rising on columns of fire from the Iranian coast and arcing toward Qatar. The launches were detected by SBIRS within seconds and tracked through their boost phase by the THAAD batteries at Al Udeid. 3 batteries now, where previously there had been 1, the additional systems having been installed over the previous 4 days under the cover of the exercise deployment. The Patriot batteries activated at 7:45 a.m. The additional battery, the one the IRGC did not know about, came online in the northwest sector, directly in the approach corridor of the Shahed 238 cruise missiles that were supposed to have killed it 7 minutes earlier. Those missiles were still inbound, flying their pre-programmed route toward Patriot battery positions that no longer matched reality. The Northwest Sector Patriot acquired 21 of the 32 Shahed 238s within its coverage arc and began engaging at 7:46 a.m. PAC-3MSE interceptors, 2 per target, climbing into the haze at Mach 5. The Shahed 238ES, fast for cruise missiles, but not fast enough, were engaged at ranges between 40 and 60 kilometers. 20 of 21 were destroyed. 1 survived and impacted on the base's northwestern perimeter, damaging a maintenance vehicle and injuring no one. The ballistic missile engagement was larger and more complex. 48 Fateh 313s in their terminal phase, arriving in compressed time-over-target windows because the IRGC had staggered their launches to achieve near-simultaneous impact. 3 THAAD batteries, each capable of engaging multiple simultaneous tracks. 12 PAC-3 batteries distributed across Al Udeid and the surrounding area. The layered architecture that CENTCOM had quietly assembled over the previous 4 days was now operating exactly as designed. The THAAD batteries engaged first in the upper tier, destroying incoming ballistic missiles at altitudes above 40 kilometers. Then the PACE-3 batteries took the leakers, the missiles that had survived or evaded the THAAD layer, in the lower tier, inside 30 kilometers. Of 48 Fateh 313 missiles, 31 destroyed by THAAD, 14 destroyed by PAC-3, 3 impacted at Al-Udeid. 1 struck a hardened aircraft shelter that contained a non-mission capable F-16 undergoing depot maintenance. The shelter contained no crew. 1 impacted on the eastern taxiway, creating a crater. 1 impacted short of the base perimeter in an uninhabited area. Al-Udeid Air Force Base was struck by 3 of 48 ballistic missiles. 1 aircraft destroyed. Non-operational, unmanned at the time of impact. 0 personnel killed. The runway required 4 hours of repair. The CAOC, in its new location in the hardened facility 214 meters from the warehouse that 22 Hoveza missiles had just leveled, was undamaged and continued operations without interruption throughout the entire engagement. The Hoveza missiles had destroyed a storage warehouse. It had contained spare parts for ground support equipment. It was not the brain of American air power in the region. The brain of American air power in the region was watching the entire battle unfold on its displays and directing the response in real time. Now the response landed. The 16 Tomahawks from USS The Sullivans arrived at the 4 Fateh 313 launch sites between 7:52 a.m. and 8:06 a.m. Their time over target windows staggered to account for different ranges. Each launch site received 4 Tomahawks. The launchers at 2 sites had already completed their firing sequences and were attempting to redeploy. The Tomahawks hit them in transit. The launchers at the other 2 sites had experienced technical delays and had not yet fired their full complement when the Tomahawks arrived. The combination of unexpended missile fuel and Tomahawk warheads produced secondary explosions large enough to be recorded by commercial satellite imagery 3 hours later. All 4 Fateh 313 launch sites were destroyed. At 8:11 a.m., 8 F-15Es from Incirlik Air Base in Turkey, which had been airborne since 5:30 a.m. on a pre-planned strike mission, arrived over western Iran. They had penetrated Iranian airspace using the gap created by the 4 radar sites destroyed by the F-35A's AARGMER missiles. Their targets were the IRGC Aerospace Force's missile storage and assembly facility at Parchin, the regional command headquarters that had directed Operation Righteous Fire at a site east of Isfahan, and the Shahid Nojeh Air Base in Hamadan Province, the IRGC air facility from which the Hoveza missile launch aircraft had staged for their cruise missile delivery mission. Each F-15E carried 4 GBU-28 bunker-busting bombs and 8 GBU-39 small-diameter bombs. The strikes were executed in 2 waves over 14 minutes. The Parchin missile storage facility, which had been in the U.S. targeting database since 1998 and whose underground dimensions had been mapped by NRO imagery to a high degree of confidence, was struck by 8 GBU-28s in sequential delay-fused impacts. The facility's underground complex, which had housed the Hoveza missiles used in the morning's attack, along with a significant reserve of Fateh 110 tactical ballistic missiles, was assessed as completely destroyed. The secondary explosions from the stored propellant were visible from commercial satellite 40 minutes later. The IRGC Regional Command Headquarters east of Isfahan was struck by 12 GBU-39 SDBs in a pattern that collapsed the above-ground command building and penetrated the below-ground command suite, with 2 GBU-28 penetrating weapons. The commander of Operation Righteous Fire had departed the facility at 7:58 a.m., 9 minutes before the F-15ES arrived, when it became clear the operation was not proceeding as planned. His vehicle was tracked by an MQ-9 Reaper drone that had been orbiting the area at altitude since 4 a.m. The vehicle did not reach its destination. Shahid Nojeh Air Base was struck at 8:24 a.m. 8 IRGC aircraft on the flight line, 4 Sukhoi Su-22 strike aircraft, and 4 F-4 Phantom IIs from the IRGC Air Force were destroyed on the ground by SDB strikes. The base fuel farm was struck by Tomahawks from a second USS The Sullivans salvo that had been fired at 7:51 a.m. The runway was cratered in 3 locations. The 20 sailors on Farsi Island were recovered at 11:47 a.m. The mechanism of their recovery was not negotiation. At 9 a.m., with the strike package still executing, 5th Fleet transmitted a direct message to the IRGC Navy commander at Bandar Abbas through a back-channel communication protocol that had been used for deconfliction during the 2016 sailor detention incident. The message was brief. It listed, by name and grid coordinate, every IRGC naval facility in the Persian Gulf. It stated that those facilities would be struck at 12 p.m. unless the American sailors were released unharmed to international waters by 11:30 a.m. It was not a negotiation. It was a timeline. The sailors were transferred to an Omani Coast Guard vessel in international waters at 11:31 a.m., 4 minutes ahead of the deadline. They were aboard USS Bataan, the amphibious assault ship that had been repositioned to the Central Gulf beginning 4 days earlier by 12:14 p.m. All 20 were unharmed. All 20 were back in U.S. custody. The final accounting was precise. IRGC Aerospace Force losses. All 4 Fateh 313 launch sites destroyed. The Parchin missile storage facility destroyed. The Isfahan Regional Command Headquarters destroyed. The Hovize launch staging facility at Shahid Nojeh destroyed. 4 radar installations destroyed. 8 IRGC aircraft destroyed on the ground. Total IRGC Aerospace Force fixed infrastructure losses, 11 major facilities. Missiles intercepted, 31 of 48 Fateh, 3 13s by THAAD, 14 of 48 by PAC-3. 3 impacted, 0 causing casualties. 20 of 21 Shahed 238 cruise missiles intercepted by Patriot. 22 of 22 Hovize cruise missiles impacted at a warehouse containing spare parts 214 meters from their intended target. American personnel casualties from all missile impacts at Al Udeid. 0 killed, 0 wounded. Aircraft destroyed at Al Udeid. 1 F-16, non-operational, unmanned, undergoing depot maintenance. American sailors captured, 20. Released unharmed, 20. Time in captivity, 3 hours and 27 minutes. The CAOC at Al Udeid never stopped running. Throughout the entire engagement, the captures, the launches, the intercepts, the strikes, American air operations across the Middle East theater continued without a single mission being canceled or delayed due to the attack. The duty officer at the CAOC later noted in his shift log that the day's operational tempo had been normal by the standards of the theater. Normal, despite 102 Iranian missiles being fired at his base. Normal, because the base had been ready, because the plan had existed, because the response had been pre-authorized and pre-positioned and waiting. In Tehran, the state television broadcast that had been prepared to announce a great victory against the Great Satan, footage of American sailors on their knees on Farsi Island, combined with images of Al Udeid burning, was not aired. The footage of the sailors existed. The images of Al Udeid burning did not. A warehouse full of spare parts and a single maintenance bay F-16 were not the images that broadcast a great victory. The Supreme National Security Council convened at noon. The IRGC Aerospace Force commander, who had designed Operation Righteous Fire, was not present. He had not reached his secondary command facility. A unilateral ceasefire was declared at 2:31 p.m. This is what happens when you mistake a diplomatic crisis for a military opportunity. This is what happens when you spend 11 months planning what you call a decisive strike against American air power, and you aim it at a base whose aircraft have already left, a CAOC that has already moved, and missile defenses that were quietly tripled in the week before you fired. 20 sailors were taken. 20 sailors came home. Al Udeid Air Force Base did not burn. It flew. It kept flying through every minute of the attack, through every intercept, through every counterstrike. The displays in the hardened CAOC lighting up with tracks and contacts and mission data. The operators at their stations doing the work that they had trained for, calm and precise in the particular way of people who had planned for exactly this morning and were not surprised by any of it. This is what happens when you bring a crisis to a nation that already has the answer. The answer was ready before you asked the question. It always is.